Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to welcome you here again on another episode of our COVID lectures. This is the fifth time we're actually having a conversation based on the current situation which we are facing as architects and landscape designers. My name is Sharon Golan-Yaron. I am the program director at the Liebling House. The Liebling House is a project of the Tel Aviv Jaffa municipality, together with the German government, with the German Interior and Building Ministry. And I'm very happy that this is actually a bilateral dialogue between Germany and Israel. I'm very happy to also invite my guests. First is German-based landscape architect Martin Rein-Kano of Berlin. He has his partner in the firm TopTech One, and architects Yael Gilad and Gilad Schiff of Gilad Schiff Architecture. And we are going to have another round of a conversation about sustainability, design, globalization, particularly in the times we're facing today. So I'm just going to give you a few words about our speakers, and I will be very reaching out for you to write your questions in the online chat, so we can have a multiple speech after, like a multiple conversation of everybody that is present here today, based in Germany and in Israel. It would be great if we can really make it into a dialogue of what's going on here, what's going on in Germany. I'm also, although I'm Israeli right now, based in Germany just for a while, and I can really see the difference in what's going on, both in terms of, you know, the weather, of course, the people that deal with Corona and how you are acting in the streets, but also you can see a lot of intervention already in urban landscape, sort of tactic urbanism that's going on here and there, which I think is also a good subject to speak about later. So Martin Rein-Kano is an Argentinian landscape architect who studied in Germany and founded TopTech One in 1996. The firm is involved in architecture and landscape planning, integrating urban design and art into a critical statement about contemporary life. Architects Yael Gilad and Galit Schiff are co-founders of Gilad Schiff Architecture, specializing in planning, design, and architectural research of innovation and sustainability planning. The firm focuses on leveraging design, architecture, and urbanism to deal with climate change and its effects on creating living spaces and urban resilience. So I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation. So Galit, you will start, please.
Thank you, Sharon, for the presenting us and allowing this beautiful platform. We are very happy to bring to the table Martin Rein-Kano from TopTech One. Good evening, Martin. We've been looking up your work for many years as a source of inspiration, especially the creative use of public space, which we find very relevant to those days. We are experiencing strange times. Life of both the public and the individual is very restricted for the last 6 months, and human interaction in public space is limited. Also, we've just came out of Yom Kippur, you probably know, when one is encouraged to think and rethink his actions and thoughts, search for forgiveness, and within the intention to become a better person, and as architects maybe make a better plan. In our architecture office, we are constantly occupied with the question of public space, how it connects together the build and the street, the building and the streets, address the needs of multiple clients and programs, and our role of creating critical and creative interpretation on familiar issues. Now we are in the middle of lockdown, and the movement limitation. And during those times, I believe we must be creative in the way we function and behave and use the public space. Your office is located in Berlin. Maybe you can tell us a bit about life now in Berlin and the role of public space, as Sharon mentioned, in Germany and in other countries where you design.
Okay, I mean, to tell you the truth, I think that we went through different phases here with the pandemic, with the COVID virus. In the very beginning, the first weeks were rather dramatic here as well. All the shops being closed and the supermarkets just being open, and it was a feeling of a little catastrophe. However, always on a, let's say, safe way. It was a kind of a catastrophe that wasn't visible. That was the interesting thing. You know, you wouldn't see people dying, or you wouldn't see the catastrophic things happen. You would just see the news, and the news would show awful things, but the reality around that one would perceive would be incredibly peaceful, and also because the streets were totally empty, what was absolutely surreal, because the city suddenly became a kind, I said it looked like a one-to-one model, an architectural model. It didn't look like a city, because it was kind of, you could look at the buildings without the disturbance of people, you know. I loved that, actually. I loved taking the bike and looking at the city that way. Was quite an experience. The second, and then, but a lot of insecurity, you know. I also felt, for me, it was probably the biggest crisis I ever experienced, also as a boss. We have 70 people working for us, and it was
Martin,
a lot.
I'm sorry to disturb you. Could you just blend in your screen, because now we see your whole presentation. Just do present.
Okay, I can. I stop sharing then. I stop sharing probably.
Okay, good.
Is it better now?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So as I said, it was a very dramatic crisis situation. We have 70 people working for us, and let's say I call it, the Americans always have interesting terms for situations. They brand things quite fast. They call it anxiety management. You know, how you deal with your anxiety, with your fears. And I think that in a big institution like our office, to balance the different needs and also to adapt to these new ways of working from home, etc., was quite a process, because I am a very sociable person. I can't imagine actually work on my own, alone at home, you know, and I can't imagine a creative process being possible without social encounter. So for me to close the office was a total no-go. So the next steps were actually quite. I mean, our infrastructure is quite good, and the virus came here late, and people are pretty relatively obedient, you know. So that in the end, it kind of that the impact was relatively small. In the end, we had very few cases of people dying. We had in general relatively low cases. And but obviously it can come back like it did in Israel. So we don't know actually where it's going to happen now, because people are also fed up with having to behave and using a mask, etc. So, but I think that in general, it's a crisis experience, probably the biggest crisis experience of this generation. You know, like maybe in the 70s, the experience of the shortage of oil, you know, the oil crisis in the 70s, where people had to leave their cars. It was an experience for the rich countries. It was kind of shocking, because you know, oil was shortened by the oil exporting countries in the 70s. So people were not allowed to take the car on Sundays, for example. It was car-free Sunday, and that's also what started the ecological movement in Germany, I would say. The experience of the car not being there anymore, and how pleasant this was. Not to have the car as a driving element of the cities was probably the beginning of the ecological anti-car movement in Central Europe, that started, I would say, through this crisis. So we're again maybe in the biggest crisis of our generation, at least here in my country. I would say we've never seen anything like. And so, but the outcome of it is, you know, I always say there is always economy. You know, when there is war, there is economy. Economy never stops. So the question is how the energies of the market, and I would say the part of the market obviously is the cultural life, develops, and how certain interest groups can use or to misuse the situation for better or for worse. And this is where we're in the middle of it. There are a lot of people, you know, there are some people that say the whole thing is a hoax, and it's not true, and it's just governments and Bill Gates that is trying to infiltrate us, you know. And there are people, so the but there are, but and then the question is how, in terms of city, in terms of urban design, what can we learn? What can we, and how, let's say, not to stop thinking just because there's a crisis, you know? I mean, the opposite, and how the energies can be redirected. And this redirection of energies can create incredibly surprising solutions. And that's what happened in the end in Germany, in Berlin, you know? We are an order-driven society, you know? We believe in rational argumentations, so that usually, because we believe in rational argumentations, we are also relatively slow developing ideas, because every argument has to be exchanged and every argument has to be listened to before things can happen. And the pandemic, to a certain extent, created a situation where you could, because of the crisis, like in a war or whatever, you could then dictate certain solutions to certain things. One of them, for example, was because people were not supposed to use the public transport because of the possible encounter, many more people went on their bikes, so the city decided to do many more bike lines. Okay, usually these processes of producing bike lines and permitting them and going through all the political permission process usually takes time, but then suddenly, because of the crisis, this was just done within days. Suddenly we had, like, I don't know, 1/3 more bike lines in the city than before, and the ones that were there were enlarged, etc. So, and that's what I mean. In the end, there are positive outcomes, probably, or let's say ways to manipulate the situation to do good progress on certain issues, I would say.
Martin,
on the other side, I think on a
I'm sorry, I know, Martin, you wanted to show some images of the current situation in Berlin. Do we have Martin? Here.
Can you see my presentation?
Maybe you do full screen, then we see it better.
Yeah, I will. I'm trying. So, I mean, well, the certain emptiness, I don't have the best pictures, but there was an incredible, this is the main biggest square in the city, that is not exactly beautiful, but it's usually packed with people, but suddenly this emptiness was kind of strange, you know, to the emptiness of the city. As I was saying, it was a kind of a one-to-one architectural model, so that changed, and the weather was incredible.
We don't have your screen now.
Yes, I think Martin is must reconnect again. Maybe we can write to him.
Yes.
So Galit and Yael, maybe we can have a conversation until he's back. But can you maybe also tell us about some projects that you are thinking of planning in Israel that came out of this sort of opportunity or the strange times we were living in until Martin is coming back?
Yes, I think we're starting to feel with clients here in Israel as well a change in the need of the public space, especially the need to use leftover spaces and the goal to make it and to turn it into a quality public space. We can see it in several examples from our office. One of them is with the work of municipalities, such as the Green Spine project that we are designing at the backyard of industrial zone in Holon, project that we have been working with the municipality of Holon how to make quality green area that reconnect with something that was for many years their backyard. Another project
is this project, was it easier to do it because of the regulations that were softer, or do you feel a change?
I feel a change, especially with the ears of the clients and the targets that they are developing. It's a project that started before, but I see how the engagement of the client is changing with the understanding of the needs and the importance of the public space that we need, the accessible quality of the public space. We see it also with a project that we designed with on top of the rooftop of a shopping mall. The shopping mall itself was closed and is closed at the moment, but we designed a quality open space on the rooftop, and this was open for the public during all time and help area that does not have enough public space. I see it also in my backyard where we have in Tel Aviv the Geddes plan with a lot of leftover spaces that have not been used for many years, and now the residents join together to place a trampoline and to remake the backyard into a quality space. So I feel there is this need, and it's addressed both top down and bottom up, and it's one of the questions I would like to share with Martin, whether it should be the responsibility of the municipality or rather the citizens and the residents themselves. Yael, maybe you want to add something here while I try to reach Martin?
Yes, I think the question, one of the questions that...
I cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. One of the questions that are interesting for me is whether these short-term interventions that Martin just discussed, these tactical urbanism.
It's really hard to hear you. I don't know, maybe you have to go closer to the mic.
Okay, now?
Yes, we'll try.
It's huge. And we are experiencing the challenges of the pandemic, definitely.
נראה לי שאפשר גם בעברית, דרך אגב, עד שנצטרף אלינו מרטין.
אוקיי, יש פה בהחלט אתגרי המגפה. אני חושבת שזה מעניין להבין, גם ממנו וגם פה כשאנחנו חוקרים את העבודה שלנו בארץ, מה באותו דרך פעולה של אורבניזם טקטי, מה אפשר ללמוד מזה לתוכניות הגדולות יותר, והאם זה באיזשהו מקום יכול קצת להחליף, או קצת, או יש לזה, הוא קצת תופס את מקומם של התוכניות ארוכות הטווח.
אבל השאלה היא האם התוכניות קצרות הטווח, האם הן יחזיקו מעמד, או שזה משהו שהוא זמני בלבד?
אז זאת שאלה מצוינת, זו שאלה שאנחנו לא נדע לענות עליה, זה יותר גם נדרשת פה איזושהי גמישות של הרשויות, כי למשל נושא של גג ירוק בתל אביב, זה נושא שיש עליו, אנחנו עשינו פרויקט לדוגמה, אבל יש עליו הרבה מאוד דיונים ומיפויים ולימוד מאוד נרחב שהעירייה מקיימת, ועדיין בכל זאת לא...
Now you can hear me. Sorry.
אוקיי, נחזור אלייך יעל תכף, תודה, כי אני חושבת שהשאלה הזאת מאוד מאוד רלוונטית גם למרטין.
I'm sorry,
yes,
guys.
Yes, Martin, no problem. We were just having discussions with Yael and with Galit, and I think some interesting questions arose from this short conversation that we had, which we can post to you later. So if you would want to continue, we're just excited to see your presentation.
Martin, are you
So
with us?
could you
Yes,
see my
we can
presentation
see.
actually? Did
Yes.
you see?
Yes.
Super.
So,
Just
where
make
did
it
I stop?
full screen.
All right, I will do that. I just go back to where I started, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I was saying that through the crisis, the public space really became much more active. You know, people, you know, all the clubs were closed, all the bars were closing at 10. So then suddenly, and the weather was spectacular. We had one of the best summers ever. Okay. So people were constantly on the street, using really the public space as a social encountering space, because it's open and you can keep a certain distance. It became, let's say, more suitable for the COVID time, so that a lot of activities that usually would happen indoors would be put into public space. And I haven't seen so many people in parks as during the COVID time, because in the end people also want to see other people, and they felt attracted to go to these places because the shops were closed. So the shopping areas that are usually full of people, there was no one around. So in the end, everyone went to the parks or to other public spaces, and that shows how important, let's say, parks are as public infrastructure also for this kind of crises, no? And well, I actually love to see the people using public infrastructure with that intensity, and you see how important they are, because they were the last chance for social interaction. So that's also one of the reasons we have it. Also, the sports studios were closing, so that all the sporty guys were suddenly using the public space. So a lot of indoor life was transported to the outside, making the city, let's say, a much more Mediterranean city than it was before. So, and for me, that was something positive. The way people organize themselves with other people, you know, the internet, obviously, that is what we are using now to communicate, became more important. The way people would self-organize themselves and create groups of interest to do things, because people also suddenly had time. As I said before, because the general activity was smaller, suddenly the city closed one of the big arteries, the Friedrichstraße, and transformed it into a pedestrian and bicycle street. One of the legendary techno clubs, the Berghain, became actually sorry?
We are with you.
So the Berghain, that is a legendary techno club in Berlin that is open between Thursday and Sunday, 24 hours, and you can go there on a Sunday midday to dance, and it feels like a Saturday night, you know. So it's this crazy place. It's very hard to get in, and it's totally legendary, a little bit pornographic, and really cool. It's really the Berlin alternative scene that is there. So this place was transformed into a museum, actually into a gallery that is displaying art now and showing different kind of concerts. So there was this concert displays here called 11 Songs by Tam Tam, and it was a total different way to experience music. So instead of being sitting in a concert hall listening to music, suddenly music became a three-dimensional event, and they let only a certain amount of people in, so that the sense of space changed totally, and the way you could experience this beautiful space without being in a crowded situation was, to experience architecture. COVID was wonderful, because it's empty everywhere, you know, because they have to manage the amount of people that enter places aren't as crowded. And that is obviously also a great thing to enjoy music, and it gives us a different formats. You have to play with different ways of offering things. So in that case, a musical concert, instead of being a frontal experience, becomes a walking around experience, and it was one of the most beautiful concerts I have seen in the last years, I must say. A total interesting musical space experience. And this, I would say, would be the positive outcome of the COVID. I mean, let's say how people are starting to implement, let's say, different strategies, and these different strategies create new forms. and they can be stupid or super interesting. For the city as such, with our conditions, I must say, I loved it. I loved how public life was suddenly on the street, and how parties were in the park. You went for a walk in the park at 11 at night, and it was full of young people. Obviously dangerous, because then no one of them were wearing a mask and whatever. But the sense that public life was on displays and visible is something beautiful. And Germany used to be much more. A lot of things happen here behind walls, also because of our weather, but also because of our culture. We don't like to display that much. So suddenly people were forced to display themselves, and it was wonderful. It was great.
I must say I'm quite jealous, because one of the things I miss the most is art and culture. I feel here they are much more restricted, and then I hope we can learn from those kinds of activities, which brings me to the next question. I mean, you mentioned the different climate here. Israel, we have also a very dense population and diverse communities that lives in close proximity. Do you think there will be one global change in design and functioning of city, or in other words, do you think there is a global answer for the crisis, or every urban culture will have to reinvent itself in its own, with its own specific character?
For sure. I think that all of us, this experience, like any social global experience, any crisis, it's not as bad as a war or whatever, but it's the closest thing to a war, at least in my country, that we've been coming since the Second World War, actually. So I think that you have to reinvent yourself, because I think that this crisis always show that mistakes. This crisis always display mistakes that happened before the crisis, And this is on a personal level. We had a lot of divorces as well, during the crisis. We had a lot of people splitting. We had a lot of relationships being questioned, because a lot of personal attitudes being questioned. We had to question ourselves a lot. We had to rethink our positions, our definitions of what we are, because if you define you, for example, I was like traveling crazily. I was like, at least 3 days a week I was traveling to different places around Europe, around the world, to do my projects. On Sunday I was stuck at home. So and then you have to question how much of it was necessary, how much of it was not necessary. I don't know. So, but in general, you have to question yourself. So I think that that we will definitely change, or let's put it like that. We have the chance, like in every crisis, and it sounds a little bit generic, but and it has been said before, but in every crisis you can come out of it forceful and have learned from it. But obviously it also can traumatize you and make you very sad, and it's very difficult to deal with it. So, but these are in the end the two chances. I think we have to. I think in my generation, it's the first time in my generation that we understood that failing is possible. We grew up in a rich country. Everything is here possible. There is security. There are chances. Things work. So it's the first time that we experience heavy failure, a total heavy failure. And I think this that's the reason I think for our generation, in our context, it's very crucial. And I think that will make the way we think different and the way we act.
Yeah, if I may, just from my experience in Berlin, there's always this, not wanting to hide anything or to put it under the carpet, even if it's not a pleasant memory, such as, I don't know, where the wall stood still marked on the floor, or where Jewish people lived, there is marks next to the buildings. So there's a lot of urban interpretations that sort of make you feel when you walk through Berlin. I'm just wondering if you can sense sort of adaptations to COVID that left their mark already on their space, maybe short-term or long-term. Is there anything marked that you can see? Like scars or?
Well, the funny thing, I think it's a crisis. Yeah, I know that people die, obviously, and I know that there is also a health issue, and I know, etc. But it is a kind of, it doesn't. And most of us, if you would be in war or whatever, you would be personally encountered by the crisis. But very few people are encountered by the real crisis directly. That makes this crisis incredibly scar-free to a certain extent. So it's kind of an invisible crisis somehow, because the visibility of it is very low. I mean, you maybe know someone that has COVID or whatever, but you don't see anyone dying. You don't see, I mean, if you're not exactly working in a hospital, you don't get, and you don't watch the news, you don't get the problem really. So this invisibility of the crisis, I think, is also typical for our age. I think that a lot of things are not physically visible anymore. A lot of things happen in an abstract way, and maybe it's a coincidence or maybe not, but I feel that the crisis is invisible. It's not leaving scars. What is living with us is the sense of a new social structures in a different way. I think people. My biggest concern, to tell you the truth, I don't know if it answers your question, and it maybe goes away from the question of public space, but the question of how we will work in future, that had defined the way we work as a society, is going to radically change. And I don't know if that change is good. And I don't know if it's good to keep the people at home. Many firms are already thinking of giving up their offices in the city, because for them it's much cheaper to have their people at home, and it's also much easier to control the people at home, than to have them in one space. So because there is no gossip in the kitchen, there is no, I don't know, Julius Caesar used to say, divide and rule.
Martin?
So it's always good.
Martin, we have problem in hearing you. Maybe you can check that while I will tell you that while we had previously the disconnection, we talked a little bit about the top-down and bottom-up strategy. We know that people, at least over here, are looking for reuse of leftover space. And I know you wanted to share with us some of your notions and ideas about that. Your office did some interesting reuse of parking projects, and we also did in the Bat Yam Biennale, we also had a similar project. Maybe you can show us this project.
No, Galit, I'm sorry, but I can't hear you. I don't know what the problem is, but the connection is very bad. I didn't understand one single word. I'm sorry.
Can you maybe share the screen and continue with the presentation? I'll type it in the chat because I think it will be easier in these circumstances.
טוב, לפני כן זה עזר כשהוא ניתק והתחבר שוב.
כן.
לקוות שזה יעבוד עכשיו. אז גלית, אולי תספרי לנו בינתיים על הפרויקט בבת ים שדיברת עליו איתו לרגע.
אני יכולה לחלוק מסך שנייה.
גם אותך לא שומעים, יעל, דרך אגב, את שם, כן.
מדהים. רגע.
מנפלאות הטכנולוגיה. Martin, you are back with us?
I hear you well.
Yes.
Okay.
We suggested we go back to the presentation because we have some problems also in hearing you, and we're maybe you can share with us the project that you did in the parking lot and talk a little bit about top-down and bottom-up strategies in the reuse of leftover space.
Okay, I can do that. I mean, I think that I mean the chances I think are good to test, let's say, also when it comes to public space. And I would just run through the presentation because I don't think that I just go to maybe this one, that's the one we are referring to. I mean, I remember this is 2007, you know, Berlin in the unification was 89. And let's say till 2010, the economical situation of the city was very bad, actually. You know, a lot of firms went bankrupt, and you know, the adaptation, let's say, of the communist country, even there was a lot of money pumped into the east. The adaptation was rather painful and created quite a crisis situation. And so that in Berlin, for example, there was a lot of leftover spaces that no one wanted to build anything on them. Okay, so and then there was this competition. It was a competition that we won about one of these sites, what to do with these sites that are empty in the middle of the city, and because no one wants to build on them, and how to use them. And so this is a proposal we did and we built that is now actually being built with a building. So that shows how these places now are taken over by the normal building market, and how boring the normal building market is, and how interesting it is to have crisis to do different things, and how important it is also to cultivate, let's say, crisis as moment of experimenting, because you can do things that without the crisis you are not allowed to do, but you have to also use these chances, I think. But in that case, I must say, it was a competition organized by the city. There was money around, so it wasn't so much taking action from our side. It was just participating in it. And what we proposed in that case is this. I mean, this empty plot was used as a parking before the competition, and we just kept the same use. We said maybe it's interesting to think of spaces not anymore as a single-use spaces, but places that can change the use in a programmatic way, you know? So we said during the week, you can park there, but on the weekends we have this giant umbrella, the umbrella opens, and then the cars have to leave the space. That was in the end the concept, yeah? So that, that instead of thinking, let's say, just in space as a stiff system, to think of space as a changeable system that can adapt, let's say, to different uses and be multi-layered with uses rather than having just one singular use. So that because the municipalities is around the area of this plot, so that people, when they go to get their passports and whatever in the municipality, they like to use this, but the municipality is closed on the weekends, so that the parking is not necessary on the weekends. And then on the weekends, it's being used for markets and other events. So that's how, and the umbrella opens automatically. So during the week, there's the cars, and during the weekends, there are different events here, like this concert or markets, so that the graphics on the ground actually resemble parking, but also can be thought as a marking for different market stands, for example. So, and I deeply believe that this kind of conflictive programming, as I call them, or aesthetic of conflicts, where you confront users and programs, create really interesting public spaces, at least in our otherwise very ordered space here in Berlin. So these kind of things you can do. One project we did in Italy, that is in a crisis since Roman times, so they're not used to anything else but crisis. So they're very experienced in dealing with crisis and not giving up, let's say, cultural activities and whatever. So this was in Potenza. Potenza has this strange train tube system, and we did this installation. We went to the city. We were invited to the city, and we had a total wild card. They told us we can do whatever we want. So we said that we would like to use one of the trains that drives on a regular base and make a garden out of it. So that's what we did. So we took away the seats, we put a planter, we put the plants into the train, and then the train started to circulate on the regular line, so that suddenly you would have a train. It was summer, so you would have a train that would have the smell and the humidity of a garden and would surprise you absolutely. So this is regular users. The train was there for a week, driving through the city, and it created, let's say, this again, this kind of encounter of absolutely ridiculous uses and ridiculous encounters. So I think these kind of projects, I would wish there would be much more opportunities to disrupt reality, let's say, and to question reality on a much more banal way, I would say, but much more effective, almost subversive way. And this is very difficult because of security. I mean, this project in Germany could probably never happen, but the Italians are more relaxed about many things. So they let us do that. So I really enjoyed that. This is a recent project I did in Melbourne, and it has to do also how you can conquer space, let's say, and make it yours in a certain way. So can I still be heard?
Yes, yes, super.
Okay, all right. So so it's not always expecting, like in the parking project that I was showing, it's not only expecting that the city creates opportunities, but you also can subversively start to take over spaces, let's say, to transform them. You know, you can take a self-initiative. I think that's very important to do that if it's possible. So this was an exercise with students, how, let's say, to take over a place, how to make a place that is a kind of a no-go area without interest, without any pressure on it, how this can become a place of interest, and how showing love to a place like that can also create an interesting encounter. So what we did, one of the strategies that I like to work with is graphics, to think of landscape as a painted or as a drawing, a one-to-one drawing. And so we started to draw. We had this chalk sprays. So we started to do this kind of mind lines into these landscapes that try to somehow create an encounter, something between the reality of the place and the reality. So every student had to do one line, and you can see how different the lines are. Some of them were very careful about the plants, for example, so they created a kind of encounter with something that otherwise would not be taken serious. And I think that's in cities, there is a value, let's say, because you were speaking about the wounds. So this is a wound in a city, and wounds are actually interesting. They tell you stories, etc. And I think as a city maker, as a space maker, you have to be very, very sensitive to the stories and the scars that are leftovers in cities, because they can be very valuable to create identity for places. So a very simple exercise for a day, how this would work, and obviously what is interesting about that is that formally how, let's say, because of the drone that we use to document the project, how suddenly this becomes also an internet, like a Google Earth reality, let's say, that it's not only a reality for a day, but because it becomes part of the net, it suddenly becomes a reality of a wider audience and of a bigger public space. So the public space, and that's also part of the pandemic, I think that the internet is a public space as such, that also needs to be designed and needs to be manipulated, and not only be left to Google and Facebook and whoever, but that also has to have, let's say, a cultural relevance and cultural quality, like public space. Yeah, but let's say it shows how new methods like drones and pictures from above create also new approaches to places. So I would say these are for me the most relevant projects, I would say, in this term, because we also, I mean, our repertoire is quite big. I am the last one running a bit slow. that we are working. Otherwise, we have, let's say, radical projects also like Superkiln that I have here as part of the presentation as well, but they are less maybe significant as a crisis tool. I think in crisis you have to be experimental if possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin, for the beautiful, inspiring project. It's very interesting because at the same time, during the same time that you did the project of the parking place, we did here in Israel, in Bat Yam, a project at the Biennale of Landscape in Bat Yam. It was just a temporary project, but in a way it combines the three projects that you showed. We did the graphic on the grid of the parking of the shopping mall, that a big shopping mall in Bat Yam, and we use the grid to locate furniture that combines plants and the movement of those furnitures. They could move at different hours of the day, and then to allow the use for parking at peak time, and then to create active public space for other times. So in a way, I saw the three projects that you showed here somehow combined in one. Yael, would you like to add something or move to the next question?
I think what we were wondering here before is how these actions of very quick interventions of tactical urbanism, if we combine all those projects, examples that we've seen, how they can infiltrate or change the long-term planning. Can it be effective? What can we learn from that? Because we can spend maybe 10 years on some big plan, and then some pandemic comes along and you can do something in 2 months that changes the life of people. So, for example, this project that Galit showed, Galit, can you release the screen for a second?
Sorry?
Yeah, I would like to share mine for a minute. And for example, the project that Galit showed was very short-term intervention in a parking lot. And on the other hand, we're working on much longer-term planning. For example, this green spine that is made of diverse spaces of diverse use, many parking lots in these spaces also, and how to make a green belt, and this will take years to plan. So how can we learn something from those quick projects and inform our larger projects, our intentions? Would be interesting to hear your opinion about.
Martin, could you hear Yael? Did you hear Yael's question?
I can't hear you very well, I must admit.
Yael was asking what can we learn from short-term projects to long-term projects?
Long-term planning. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question? I can't hear you. I'm very sorry. The quality is really bad. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, Yael was asking what can we learn from short-term projects to long-term planning?
Long-term, the long-term, what is the direction of the long-term? Well, I mean, there are two things. First of all, green infrastructure has to have a durable frame. So not everything can be kind of temporary and funny and whatever. And the durable frame for public space is expensive. It's something that the society has to be willing to spend, to have big parks, to have big public infrastructure in general, being schools, being trains, being whatever you count. This is the end. Public infrastructure is always a guarantee that not only rich people can enjoy life, but also poor people can be part of the whole society, can, as a unified society, can share life. If the less public infrastructure you have, the more you privatize life, the less social equality you will have. So this is something, because you also could use or misuse the crisis to say we only do temporary stuff because it's cheap and it's in the papers, so it looks like we did something as politicians, and then we don't need to do, let's say, the durable stuff that is required. So you need to be careful with the temporary, that it doesn't substitute, let's say, the durable infrastructural elements that are required in the investment and maintaining of it. I think another outcome, as I was trying to start saying, I think that the way we work is going to significantly change. People are going to work much more from home. A lot of people are not going to go to work anymore. And that will create a totally different use of the space, because there will be less offices, there will be less life in centers. So the question is, if in the life is going to be missed on commercial areas, for example, it's going to then happen much more in the parks. So I think that the organization of work will change, because I think for the firms, as I said, it's good to have the people working at home, because you also, for me, for example, if I have someone working here in my office in Berlin, it costs me, let's say, 5,000 to 6,000 euros a month, including the renting of the office, the providing of infrastructure, obviously the wage of the person, etc. But if they're working from home, I also can hire someone in Bangladesh or in Israel. This much cheaper, maybe not as cheap as Bangladesh, but it's probably cheaper than here in Germany. So you globalize also the working force. You not only globalize the world, but you start to globalize services, and then I think that will change radically the way societies work, and I think that will also change the way we experience and develop space. So this would be a negative outcome, in my opinion. The globalization of working force will destroy the workers' rights in the developed countries, because you don't depend anymore on the workforce on site. You can use people from India, you can use people from Africa for certain jobs. You don't need to have the working force of your region being hired. And this is a danger.
Sorry. And in terms of the city, what do you think about business districts and office buildings? Do you think that we're going to see a change? We know many cities, for economic reasons, developed a lot of office space areas. They want it in order to get more money, and now we all experience people are working from home. So how are we what's gonna happen with the office districts and the office building itself?
Well, let's put it like that. Work is like school and other institutions, that's a place where you meet people as well. So it creates, let's say, a social glue to our life as well. Places we work, and that's the way to work. If you sit in the tram or in the train or in the bus, you start to share your life.
We cannot hear anything. It's like it's really problematic. So I don't know. I think the best idea would be if you could try to disconnect and connect again for the last time. I'm sorry, but it's just very bad, the quality. Like half of what you say, we cannot hear. So it's very unfortunate. Something to maybe try again. Can you disconnect and connect again? Martin? He doesn't hear me.
Should I connect again?
Yes, can you please disconnect and connect again? Galit?
Okay.
So unfortunately, it's a bit problematic the way this goes now, because Martin is
I agree.
is not, his sound quality is not good. So I think maybe if you could try and wrap up what you wanted to say, and then we leave a few minutes for Martin in the end.
Good. So in general, I think as we saw here, Martin, you're here with us. Can you hear us?
Yes, but your
Okay.
microphone is off.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Yes. So
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. No, I would say the way we work will change. People will be at home. The workforce will globalize. Services, you can hire people in other countries. You don't need to depend on the laws that protect workers in your country and make the work maybe very expensive. You can get people from other places to work for you because you don't need to have them physically in your space. You just need the internet to be connected to them. So that will create, I think, a difficult social situation because a lot of jobs will be exported, and it will, and on the other side, even the workforce within the country is much more flexible because you can hire someone from other regions where maybe property is cheaper. You don't need to live in the big centers anymore to get work. And I think this is the biggest change that will occur, and that will also create a lot of questions. What it means for the cities and the office buildings, I don't know. They will be probably transformed into housing, or maybe they get turned down, or maybe I don't know. But the idea that the city is this place and getting to work, the commuting obviously is a pain in the ass, but on the other side, you also share space and time with, let's say, unknown people. And that gives you always a certain sense of social glue. If you go in the bus or in the tram or in the train, you share space with people you actually don't know that are on the way to work. But these kind of encounters are what I actually at least enjoy in urban life, that is an accident of who you're going to meet somehow. And this is going to be gone. So the idea of tribes that you have in the internet anyway, the idea that there's only the tribes of certain interests joining together, will grow also physically much more. You will also physically only encounter the people that you actually like, so that you never are going to create understanding for those you don't like. But society and democracy is about understanding that the people you don't like are also humans, and you have to find a way to somehow maybe not like, but respect them. And the more you create tribes, the more you lose the ability to understand different ways of life, and to accept that there are different ways of life, and that you have to respect that somehow. And so this is where I see the danger.
I think this evening is giving us a one-to-one example of the benefits and disadvantages of the use of technology and the possibilities. On the one hand, we have a very easy way to connect with you, Martin, and to hear from Berlin, and it's quite easy. We don't have to have you fly here and come over. On the other hand, we still suffer from a lot of disconnection, and it's not really the pleasure of having you here and sharing the information. So I think the new ways of working and it gives us a lot of benefits, but on the other hand, for long term, it won't be able to really replace the human connection. And therefore, I think the way of planning and reacting to reality will have to be somehow adjust for more flexibility and hopefully the process of design and planning somehow will get easier and allow itself to adjust to the times that we really need, because at the moment, the long-term the infrastructure of planning itself as a way not to develop and does not enable us to give the real solution on real time where it's needed.
Can I add something? It's interesting that we have here among the audience Lital, that is also in Netanya, the municipal architect, and as an example to what we just spoke about the business districts, she mentioned that many entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I really can't hear you. So,
okay.
Unless there's another way for you to talk.
Maybe Lital, you want to say?
Yeah, I could. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I could say I was just writing to Yael that I'm the municipal architect for Netanya. We're just now dealing with a large master plan for the entire industrial area that's supposed to become more of an office area or office oriented, also with mixed use, but not much of like housing. And every single day we get requests from entrepreneurs and architects and landowners saying, oh, this is Corona time. You can't think that we can just leave it all as offices and retail spaces. We need to have housing. People are working from home now. And I think we can't really do that yet because it's too early to know the actual effects of what is going to happen. And people still need to work outside of their homes sometimes. Maybe it won't be the same type of offices we're working at now. Maybe there will be rented offices or smaller spaces or more mixed use, which is what we're trying to do. But I think that right now what I'm seeing in the long-term planning is that people are trying to use the short-term instance that we're in now to affect future procedures when we don't really know what we will need and what we will want to have. And probably what we will need is more flexibility in thinking, but also flexibility in what we plan. And it's not very easy in the planning system we have here with the legislation. It's really, really not that easy. Thanks for letting me talk.
I think the legislation topic is very interesting because just for example, we had in our last talk, people from Berlin and Tel Aviv comparing the way you do tactical urbanism with bike lanes. And the person from Israel said that all of a sudden in Tel Aviv, you could put bike lanes very fast, which you normally can't do because the Ministry of Traffic is in charge of it. And now because of the Corona, all of a sudden you could ad hoc do like traffic lanes, tactic traffic lanes for bikes. Is it the same? Do you, Martin, feel also, or you, Lital in Netanya, that you would like the communities or maybe the cities to have more power in order to create the public space and not be so much connected or dependent on the larger governance that is legislating things?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that the need of the people has to be met on the level, on the scale of the people. That is usually the more regional, the better. Well, it depends. I mean, obviously there's also national public space infrastructure, no, but or traffic infrastructure. But yeah, I don't know. I would be very careful in defining uses anyway that are monothematic in general. Never been healthy to have that. Being offices or housing or whatever, you create or stupid suburbs full of unhappy housewives, or you create this like office neighborhoods full of unhappy husbands or whatever. To be a bit sexist, I'm sorry. No, but it's I think that's something you did in the 60s. So without Corona, I would rethink the programming of an area like that. If it's just driven by offices, I think you should do that anyway. It's more resilient to have spaces that are more mixed, I think, and it's also more healthy in cities in general, you know, because otherwise, or it's dead during the day because everyone is working and all the kids are at school, or in the offices the other way around. It's during the day full of people, but then at night it's totally dead because no one lives there. So I think good cities are cities that mix actually living and working, and they are also more resilient when it comes to change, you know. I mean, the space that you see here where I'm sitting is my office. Used to be actually a canteen for a theater, for a union actually, before the war. So the kind of ability of spaces to change use is also a kind of resilience of cities. But that you only can do when you have a mix. If you don't have a mix, it's very hard to create reuse. But reuse of space is actually one of the secrets of good places, I think. That you can transform from housing to work, from work to housing, from whatever, commercial to private to public, etc. So if a city doesn't have that, I think then it's less urban, it's less socially transformable, I think. Yeah. So I wouldn't do any new developments that are monothematic, independent of. Sorry.
No, I said I have to agree with you. The thing is that the entire building code here is not as flexible as I personally would like to see it.
I understand.
So even if you want to have mixed use, it will always be defined as the ground floor with shops and retail, and then the next floor, let's think about it. If we're really, really into it, then maybe we will have some offices, and then the top will be housing and apartments. And it's very hard to actually say, okay, we want everything to be totally flexible. In Israel, by the way, what will probably happen is
I understand.
though, because people don't like to live above shops. It's always nice when someone else has it, not under your house. You might have noise or something. A bit cynical, sorry.
But in the end, you also have to. No, I understand. But in the end, you know, in every country has a certain whatever character. That you have also to use and misuse and whatever and adapt to create good spaces. I don't think you can change people, you know, or a very slow process usually. So that that it's good to work with material that is there. So I think, for example, here in Germany, again, this idea of creating a certain improvisation is very important because real life is so incredibly stiff here, you know. Everything is so ordered and systematic that it can be a relief to have kind of chaos. But obviously, it's something different in a Mediterranean country where improvisation and chaos is kind of part of the culture and makes them also very attractive, you know. So then maybe you need something else. So in the end, you also have to think what is really needed and what can you play with and what is also not necessary. I mean, you know, you don't need to create anarchic situations in Israel. The whole thing is an anarchic party, you know. So in the end is how you deal with context, I think, is very, very important. And to hope that the context will change is to hope the messiahs will come. So you can believe, but it won't probably happen. Sorry.
That's a very optimistic way to say it. Galit, would you want to close this round because we're off time? I'm sorry. This conversation took a little bit longer. Although I really liked what you said, Martin, about the flexibilities of space. I wish we could adopt this when we plan. But Galit, perhaps you would want to close our session.
I want to thank Martin for the inspiration, both on the way of thinking and also with I think the work of Topotech is very rich with color and details, and the way it affect the communities and the people it addresses, because I think it's not only the matter of putting the public space there, but the way of designing it does matter, and I think the richness and the level of details give a sense of place and create new possibilities for the people, and I think it's full of inspiration. I want to share our hope here that this crisis will take, you talk about resilience, and I want to say a word about sustainability, because it's quite clear that this crisis has to do with the climate change and the climate crisis, and I hope this economic situation will not affect the efforts that are done for sustainability, but rather to the contrary, that it will show the necessity of integrating sustainability thinking and planning in long and short-term plans. So this is our hope and effort that we believe should be on the table. So thank you, Martin, and thank you, Sharon and Liebling House for this beautiful platform.
Yes, thank you, Martin. It was very much a pleasure to hear you speak and hear your passion about the subject of urbanity. I think we can learn a lot from you and from Galit and Yael as well. So thank you very much. To all who are still here, next week we are going back to history. We're going to look at gender, because actually in Israel, female architects were already part of planning even before the establishment of the state. Most of us know that, but we have Dr. Sigal Davidi, who is an historian focusing on studies of local modernist architecture during the British Mandate, and she will tell us about a woman I'm sure you haven't heard of still, and her name is Gertrude Goldschmidt. So we're going to travel back in time and see how female architects planned during the Mandate here in Palestine. So I'm very much welcoming you to next week's lecture. And Martin, thank you again to everybody who was participating today as well. And we hope to see you again, maybe in Tel Aviv, Martin, maybe with a project. That would be amazing. We're doing a lot of interesting things, collaborating with international architects. So now that we've seen your work, perhaps Galit and Martin, we can think about something together. So thank you again, and see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.